नमस्कार।
नमस्कार।
व्यक्ति जिस जगह पर रहता है, अपने भविष्य को लेकर हमेशा जिज्ञासु रहा है। पश्चिम का संसार हो या पूर्वी क्षेत्र, ग्रह और नक्षत्र सामान्य रूप से एक जैसा व्यवहार करते हैं, परंतु उनकी गणना और उनके द्वारा दी जाने वाली भविष्यवाणी में थोड़ा सा अंतर देखने को मिलता है। दोनों का उद्देश्य आम जनमानस को बेहतर बनाना तथा आने वाली घटनाओं के बारे में जानकारी देना होता है। पश्चिम और वैदिक ज्योतिष दोनों ही ज्योतिष की शाखाएं हैं। पश्चिमी ज्योतिष में 12 राशियां होती हैं और सूर्य की स्थिति पर आधारित होती हैं। ये राशियां स्थिर होती हैं और साल में एक निश्चित समय पर आती हैं। वैदिक ज्योतिष में भी 12 राशियां हैं, लेकिन ये राशियां चंद्रमा की स्थिति पर आधारित है। पश्चिम ज्योतिष में कुंडली और ग्रह की स्थिति को सूर्य के सापेक्ष हम देखते हैं। वैदिक ज्योतिष में चंद्रमा के सापेक्ष हम इसको देखते हैं। पश्चिमी ज्योतिष में समय की गणना ट्रॉपिकल जोडिक के आधार पर की जाती है। वहीं वैदिक ज्योतिष में समय की गणना निरायन राशि चक्र के आधार पर होती है। पश्चिम ज्योतिष में ग्रह का प्रभाव जातक के व्यक्तित्व और उसके जीवन पर पड़ने वाले असर के रूप में देखा जाता है। वैदिक ज्योतिष में ग्रह के प्रभाव को व्यक्ति के वर्तमान कर्म और पूर्व जन्म के कर्मों के आधार पर जोड़कर देखते हैं। पश्चिम ज्योतिष में एक व्यक्तित्व, जबकि वैदिक ज्योतिष ये कहता है कि व्यक्ति आध्यात्मिकता के रूप में भी अपने आप को आगे बढ़ा सकता है। आज हमारे साथ श्री जेम्स बरहा हैं। आप एक अमेरिकी ज्योतिषी, लेखक और अद्वैतवाद के शिक्षक हैं। आपने 1978 में ज्योतिष सीखा। 1982 और 1984 में दिल्ली और बॉम्बे में श्री आर सनाथन और पी एम पाडिया के साथ ज्योतिष का अध्ययन किया। आपने वर्ष 1986 1986 में अपनी पुस्तक प्राचीन हिंदू ज्योतिष के माध्यम से वैदिक ज्योतिष को पश्चिमी लोगों को सुलभ बनाया। आप दुनिया भर में वैदिक और पश्चिम ज्योतिष दोनों का प्रयोग करके भविष्यवाणी देने के लिए माने जाते हैं। आपने ज्योतिष की कई पुस्तकें लिखी हैं, जिसमें ज्योतिष से काफी नजदीक से आपका लेन देन, ज्योतिषीय गणना भी निकल के आई है। वैदिक ज्योतिष से प्राप्त अंतर्दृष्टि, प्राचीन हिंदू ज्योतिष कला और अभ्यास, आधुनिक पश्चिम और हिंदू प्राचीन ज्योतिष, लिविंग रियलिटी, माई एक्स्ट्रा ऑर्डिनरी समर विद जॉब बॉब एमरसन ने अद्वैतवाद पर एक क्लासिक ग्रंथ में भी आप उनके साथ रहे। पावर ऑफ ट्रांजिट भी आपकी एक बेस्ट पुस्तक मानी जाती है। आप आदिगुरु शंकराचार्य के अनुयायी हैं और अद्वैतवाद को मानते हैं। इसके मुताबिक ईश्वर ना एक है और ना ही अनेक, संसार में केवल ब्रह्म ही सत्य है और जगत मिथ्या है। अद्वैतवाद के मुताबिक जीव या ब्रह्म, ईश्वर अलग नहीं है। अद्वैतवाद के मुताबिक ब्रह्म जीव के अंदर ही वास करता है। आज संभव ज्योतिष के माध्यम से हम ये जानने का प्रयास करेंगे कि पश्चिम ज्योतिष और वैदिक दोनों में सामान्य घटनाओं में क्या अंतर होता है, देश काल पात्र क्या भविष्यवाणी में प्रभाव रखता है और किस प्रकार दो अलग अलग सभ्यताओं के लोग इसको अपने जीवन में उतारते हैं। मैं अपने मित्र श्री धर्मरायण शर्मा जी से निवेदन करूंगा कि वो मिस्टर जेम्स बरहा के साथ अपना कन्वर्सेशन स्टार्ट करें और पश्चिमी ज्योतिष और हिंदू ज्योतिष को एक सामान्य गणना के रूप में समझने का प्रयास करें। श्री धर्मनारायण शर्मा जी।
Sir, good morning. Welcome to Sambhav Jyotish. There was a small introduction of yours in Hindi, and that was about explaining about your books and your work you have done about the astrology a lot.
It's a hard question to answer. Do people believe it? Many people do, and many people do not. There are plenty of astrologers who make a living at astrology, Western astrology, or even Jyotish in America. So the clients keep us busy. So there are enough people coming for astrology. But then there are people that do not believe it only because they don't know. They have no knowledge of it. In fact, if you go to places like New York and California, then you're going to find more people that believe in astrology. If you go to the, middle states, Tennessee and Mississippi, they're not as advanced, they're not as sophisticated as the people on the coast, so there'll be less. So some yes and some no. Enough do, plenty do. The other question, is it alike or different? Well,
Yep.
it's alike because the planets are the same. Like
Yes.
when I went to India, I had been studying Western astrology for 5 years. So when I went to learn Jyotish, it was very fast because I know what Mercury means. I know what the houses mean. Of course, there are some differences. Some of the houses may have different meanings, but very little, very little. But the techniques are different. In the Western system, we don't use dashas and bhuktis, but we have progressions. We have solar progressions and secondary progressions that Jyotish does not have. So they're different, but really, as soon as I learned Jyotish, I wrote the first book in the Western world on Jyotish. But look at the title, Ancient Hindu Astrology for the Modern Western Astrologer. So this was written for people that already understood what Western astrology was, and then it would be very quick to learn Jyotish. If you started from the beginning with that book, it would take longer. Now, the other thing is, Western astrology is more about your psychology, your behavior, and your experience. In Jyotish, it's just about the events. So in Jyotish, if you go get a Jyotish reading, they may say you're going to lose your job. They may say someone's going to die. They may say you're going to win an award. In the Western system, yes, we would be looking for when something good would happen or something bad would happen, but then we would explain, this is how you're going to experience it. This is what your psychology will be. And it's not as simple as it seems. One person could go through a divorce and it could be a terrible experience. Another person could go through a divorce and the astrologer could say, this is good for you. You're not going to have any problems. It's good that you're divorcing. You'll be fine. You won't be upset. The other person, you're going to be very upset. So it's more psychological and behavioral. The Hindu system is better at predicting. It's better at predicting the natal chart telling about marriage, children, career. I find the Jyotish chart much better. But the Western system has predictive methods with transits and progressions predicting the future that are quite good. They're not the same as dashas, but they are quite good. Now, if you go further back into Western astrology, which happened after my book came out in 1986, many people in America, not huge numbers, but a significant amount of astrologers found this Hindu astrology book and they loved it and they started going toward it because it had dashas and bhuktis and things like that. So about 5 or 6 years after my book came out, the big Western astrologers, Robert Hand, Robert Schmidt, they decided to go back to the Greek and Latin texts from hundreds of years ago. And guess what they found? They found time lords, which are very similar to dashas and bhuktis.
Oh, that's great. So in a way, you're saying like Eastern astrology is somehow, I mean, it's there in the similar way. I mean, they go in the similar way somehow, Eastern and Western astrology, leaving Dasha Bhukti.
Both horoscopes show you the person's life.
Okay.
However, in my experience, I use both. When I do a reading, I put both charts in front of me. And the Western horoscope uses a different zodiac.
Okay.
The Indians use the sidereal zodiac, which is based on the actual positions of the stars, and they use what's called the precession of the equinox. So every 72 years, the Earth tilts 1 degree. So the point that they called 0 Aries 5,000 years ago, after 72 years, the 0 Aries was now 29 Pisces. 72 years later, it would be 28 Pisces. So the sidereal zodiac uses that precession. The Western system uses the tropical zodiac, and they do not consider the precession. It doesn't mean that it's a wrong zodiac. because it's connected to the first day of spring. So it's complicated to explain. They're both accurate, they both work, but the Western is going to tell you more about who the person is. Now, I wrote a book, my very last book that I wrote 2 years ago, well, 3 years ago, 2022, the Braha Sutras.
Okay.
And one of the sutras is in there is that when you're doing a horoscope, you want to know what is the karma. What is the karma of the person? Are they going to be famous? Are they going to be poor? Are they going to have happy marriage, many children, no children? You want to know the karma.
Right.
But if you don't know who the person is, then you're missing half the picture. So when you go to India and you get Indian astrology readings, they don't care who you are, at least in my experience. They don't care who you are. They're telling you what's going to happen. In the Western system, they're more telling you who you are and a little bit of the karma. When you do both systems, then you can know what's going to happen to the person, but also who they are. So, for example, I may see a horoscope that indicates lots of healing ability, healing talents, fixing things, healing things. But the career might not be in medicine, might not be in healing. The career could be engineering. But the horoscope, because the career house is indicating engineering, and the Dasamsha chart, the chart, it's a divisional chart, a Varga chart called the Dasamsha, and the Dasamsha might also be indicating mechanical technical career. But the rest of the chart is all about healing and fixing. So if I'm doing a horoscope for a person like that, I'm going to say, look, this is your career, but who you are is a healer. Who you are is a fixer. And that means that, yes, they're doing their career, but they're constantly helping people. They're constantly fixing things. People come to them when they have problems. Hey, I have a problem. What should I do? This guy's an engineer. Doesn't matter. Who he is a healer. That's who he is. So, or a person, sometimes you see that who a person is an artist, but their career is in medicine. The career is in medicine, but who they are is an artist. So everything they do in a very creative, harmonious, artistic way. Even when they're doing their medicine, they're doing it in an artistic, creative. So that's how I see the two different systems. So if you only have one system, I think you're missing half of the picture. That's why. So when I learned I have to tell you, when I learned Western astrology, I was studying for 5 years. I was obsessed with it. But I didn't want to be a professional astrologer because when I would look at the Western chart, I couldn't see how many children. I couldn't see clearly the marriage. I couldn't see clearly the career. I had general ideas, but not specific enough. So I was not a professional. Then when I learned the predictive part, then I had both. That's when I decided, yes, I can do this. And from the very first, as soon as I learned Jyotish, what I started promoting is not, oh, you should do Jyotish. No, I was saying you should do Jyotish and you should do Western, both, especially because your clients are Westerners. They want to know their psychology. They want to know how they're going to experience life. Not just what's going to happen, but how am I going to experience it? Will I be There are people who are very famous and very wealthy who are not happy because Venus and the fourth house are terrible. There are people who do not have a good career, do not have much money, but they're happy because Venus and the fourth house are very, very strong. So you have to know everything. So Indians just doing Jyotish is not complete. Westerners doing Western is not complete. Now, astrology is also a psychic profession. It's a psychic work. So you may have people that don't know Jyotish, but they pick up psychically the karma. You may have Jyotishis who don't know Western astrology, but they can pick up the psychology psychically. In India, when I studied in India, in 1982 and 1984, I already knew Western astrology. It's a completely different system than Hindu, but there's planets, there's houses, there's aspects, so it's similar in that way. And I brought horoscopes with me. So I would put the horoscopes in front of my teacher, Santanam, or 2 years later, Padya, and they would begin reading the horoscope. And they would be saying something accurate and saying something accurate. And then they would say something that was accurate, but I said, where are you seeing that in the horoscope? And it wasn't in the horoscope. They would say something to make an excuse, but it wasn't. It was psychic. Not everything, not everything. I'm saying most of it was astrological, but sometimes something would come out of their mouth and I'd say, where's that in the horoscope? It was psychic. And the Indian astrologers, I find, are far more psychic. Now, Western astrologers are psychic as well, because astrology in the horoscope is the eighth house. The eighth house tells you if you're going to be interested in astrology. The eighth house is not just astrology, it's everything psychic, metaphysical, astral, otherworldly. So Western astrologers are psychic as well, but Indians, most of them, have had generation after generation after generation of vegetarianism. They are more sensitive. They're not eating meat all the time, generation after generation. So they're more subtle. They're more psychic. That's my understanding, my belief.
So practically in Western astrology also, I mean, the bhavas and the rashis and planets and everything, I mean, the principles are almost similar to
They're very
predict all
similar.
these
Yes,
combinations and
they're very similar. They're very similar. You know, there's a lot of things. I've been at this for 45 years.
Yep.
And there's a lot of things that I learned from Hindu that I taught to Westerners. But I have also taken what I know from the Western and applied it to the Hindu charts. Let me give you an example. In India, when, wait a minute, just give me 1 second.
Sure.
So this is the way a Western astrological program would be. So if you look over here, you see the sun at 10 degrees and Mercury at 27 degrees.
Okay.
Now, a Western astrologer is going to see the sun and Mercury, and he's going to say, well, it's 17 degrees apart from each other. Okay? That's not too strong and not too weak. Let me see. This is not a good. Just give me 1 second.
Yes, sir.
I want to make. This is an important point, so I want to make it. Okay. So if you see this Uranus and Neptune, they are very close together.
Okay.
Neptune is 22 and Uranus is 21.
21, yeah.
Okay. So they are very close together.
Very
That's
close,
going
yeah.
to have a particular meaning. But in India, they wouldn't draw the chart that way. In India, they would not put the degrees over there. They wouldn't put the degrees there. They would put the degree, Uranus is 257 degrees and Neptune is 259 degrees. So what would happen is that in India, they wouldn't necessarily see how tight the aspect is. Like in my horoscope, the 10th house ruler is Saturn. Saturn, the 10th house is career. Saturn's at 14 degrees of Virgo, and Jupiter's at 14 degrees of Pisces. So they are exactly opposite each other. But the Indian astrologer would not know that, because it would simply say, it wouldn't say 14 and 14. It would say 152 for Saturn and 285 for Jupiter. You wouldn't see it. So this was something where I already knew Western astrology, so I could see those degrees, that it was a very strong aspect versus a very weak aspect. So I brought that into Jyotish. Also, stationary planets. Nobody talked about stationary planets in Jyotish. In Western astrology, we know that a stationary planet is the strongest of all planets, but it doesn't exist in India. Now it does, because I've done 85 videos. I've written 6 astrology books. So now everybody uses it. What is a stationary planet? Planets appear to go retrograde. So Mercury is moving forward 10 degrees, 11 degrees, and then it begins to slow down and stop. When it stops, it's stationary. It's very strong. Then it goes backwards, 12, 11, 10, 9. Then it stops. That's a stationary planet. When you're born and the planet is stationary, that planet is phenomenally powerful. This was not in Jyotish 45 years ago. I brought that in because I know it from the Western. So there's lots of things like that. There's lots of things like that.
And sir, is there any cultural differences? See, a lot of cultural differences are there in Western world and Eastern world, like marriages, children, a relationship.
Major
Do
difference.
they affect your predictions, or I mean, like
Absolutely,
beliefs?
absolutely, absolutely. So when I'm doing a horoscope for a Westerner, if I see that there's problems with the mother, bad relationship with the mother, or the mother has a terrible life, I will say the mother is a big problem, and they'll go, yes, my mother's a big problem. If I'm doing the chart of an Indian and I say, your mother has big problems, they go, no, mother's fine. I see big problems with the child. No, the child is fine. Now, it took me a long time. I said, is astrology not working in India for the family? After about 30 years, I came to understand that Indians cannot speak ill of family members.
Yeah.
They cannot say, yes, my mother is a problem. They cannot say it. It's against the culture. That's just one of the things. Secondly, if I'm doing a chart of a Westerner, somebody from England, somebody from America, somebody from Germany, and the marriage house is very bad, I'm going to say there's a strong likelihood, 70, 80% divorce. I could see the same horoscope of an Indian. The marriage is terrible. They will not divorce. They will not divorce. This is cultural. And then when I say, but the marriage is terrible, they say, no, it's okay. It's fine. We compromise. I'm talking about extreme cases. I'm not talking about it's a little bit difficult. I'm talking about horoscopes where you go, oh my God, this is a terrible marriage. And they say, it's okay. We're fine.
Yeah, the lot of relationship. I mean, there's a bonding and the emotions, they're very strong in the Eastern world. So the people don't accept that.
Here's
And
another
then,
thing.
yeah,
In America, the parents live for the children. In India, the children live for the parents. So if the parents say, we want you to marry this person, they're going to marry that person, even if they don't like that person, they're not attracted to that person, they're going to honor their parents. It's a different culture.
yeah,
And the bonds are much stronger. The family is tighter in India.
yeah.
So now here's another thing. In my first 20 years, I didn't do many charts. I did charts of Indians, but not many. I was famous from the beginning because in 1986, I wrote the ancient Hindu astrology book. It was sold even in India. So I would get some Indian clients occasionally. About 10, 15 years ago, my videos went all over the world, and I'm getting maybe half my clients are now Indian. In the first 10, 20 years, I would do the chart of an Indian. and I would say, this is the horoscope of an artist. This is an artist. They say, no, I'm an engineer. This is the chart of an artist or a writer. No, I'm a doctor. So after a while, I said, are you happy? No, I don't like my career. Because they're not in the Dharma. The Dharma is what shows up in the horoscope as the most natural. So if it's natural for you to be a business person, you should be a business person. If it's natural for you to be in medicine, you should be in medicine. If it's natural to be in the arts, you should be in the arts for your evolution, for your spiritual evolution. So after about 5 or 6 years, when I got a chart of an Indian, if it wasn't a chart for business, money, engineering, or law, some big profession, if it wasn't that, if it was something else, I would say, okay, you have the horoscope of a philosopher, but you're probably in law and you don't like it. You have the horoscope of an artist, but you're probably, a computer person, but you don't like it. And they would think I was psychic. How do you know this? I said, well, that's cultural, because the culture, I remember the first time an Indian woman shocked me. I said, you're definitely an artist, but I'm sure you don't do that. I'm sure you do a money-making profession. She told me, no, I'm an artist. You're an artist? She said, yes. My family came this close to disowning me. They argued, they fought, they argued, they fought, and finally they accepted it. Most of them won't. Now, today is changing a little bit.
Yeah.
But that's cultural.
Yeah, that's cultural. We definitely agree. There's a small, the final question. Do you suggest remedies also, sir? I mean, some sort of stones or some mantras or, some sort of remedies in Western world?
How can you do astrology and not prescribe yagyas and gemstones? How can you possibly do that?
Oh, that's great.
Because if you're doing the horoscope and you see a terrible dasha coming, a terrible period,
Yes.
or you see danger, what are you going to do? Oh, you're going to die. Oh, you're going to have an accident. No, you warn them. You need to get 2 9-day yagyas a year during this period. You need to be very careful. Don't go traveling. Stay home. Go be somewhere meditating. Do the yagyas. The gemstones are not going to stop a crisis, but the gemstones are there to protect you throughout life. Throughout the whole lifetime, the gems will help. So yes, of course I do that. Even if you go to my website, you'll see the mantras, all the mantras. For the moon, Tadi Shanka Tasharabam Kashiro Darnava Sambhavam Namami Shashinam Somom Sombur Mukuta Bhushanam. That's a moon mantra. So if the moon is afflicted, you do that 108 times a day for 11,000 times, 110 days, and then you have a chance of the karma being mitigated. It doesn't completely get rid of the karma, but it lessens it. Yeah.
Sir, we are sincerely, highly thankful to you. It was a nice and wonderful conversation today.
Thank you so much for all these conversations.